The temperature was 32 degrees. She was 7 months pregnant, standing in her own backyard, in nothing but a thin nightgown.
This
And
is
her millionaire
irrefutable
husband was
proof of
spraying
the
her with a
wire
garden
transfers,
hose.
Caroline.
You tracked mud on the
It
marble
appears
floors,
your
he
accounts
said
have been
calmly.
drained.
You know how I feel about the floors. Caroline Ashford had everything. A $6 million mansion, designer clothes, a husband who seemed perfect to everyone who met him. But behind closed doors, she was living in a nightmare. What Derek Mercer didn't know was that his father-in-law, a billionaire who never trusted him, had installed hidden cameras throughout the house. Cameras that captured every insult, every shove, every moment of calculated cruelties. 6 months of footage, 47 documented incidents, and one freezing night that would finally bring his empire crashing down. But the surveillance footage was just the beginning, because Caroline was about to discover that she wasn't Derek's only victim. There was another woman, another pregnancy, another family built entirely on lies. This is a story about betrayal that runs deeper than you can imagine, about a woman who lost herself in a marriage designed to destroy her, and about the moment she decided to stop being a victim and start being a warrior. By the end of this story, you will watch a monster lose everything: his money, his reputation, his freedom, and you will watch a broken woman rise from the ashes to build something extraordinary. Stay with me until the very end, because the justice delivered in the final chapter is worth every single minute. This is the story of Caroline, Aurora, and the garden hose that changed everything. Let's begin. The water hit her skin like 1,000 frozen needles. Caroline gasped, her body seized. The shock of the cold stole the breath from her lungs. She stood in the backyard of their $6 million Connecticut estate. Her thin nightgown clung to her pregnant belly. The outdoor thermometer read 32 degrees. Derek held the garden hose with the calm precision of a man watering flowers. His face showed nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just the blank efficiency of someone completing a task. "You tracked mud on the Carrara marble," he said. His voice was reasonable, almost bored. "You know how I feel about the floors." Carolyn's teeth chattered so violently she could barely speak. "Derek, please, the baby. The baby will be fine." He adjusted the spray, directing it at her legs. "You should have thought about that before you ruined my floors." She could feel her daughter kicking frantically inside her. 7 months pregnant, standing in her own backyard, being sprayed like a mom that had misbehaved. The back door was locked. She had tried it already. Their housekeeper, Rosa, had left 2 hours ago. Derek had sent her home early. Caroline understood now why he had insisted. No one was coming to help her. The water was so cold it burned. Her fingers had gone numb. Her feet ached against the frozen grass. She wrapped her arms around her belly, trying to shield her unborn child from the assault. "Derek," she tried again. "I'm sorry about the floors. I'll clean them. I'll clean the whole house. Please." He circled her slowly. The hose followed. He pointed at her calves. "You missed a spot," he said. "Right there, see the mud?" There was no mud. Her legs were clean. They had been clean when this started, but she nodded anyway. She always nodded. "I see it," she whispered. "I'm sorry." The water continued for another 3 minutes. 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. Caroline counted her daughter's kicks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one a tiny rebellion against the cold invading their shared body. Finally, Derek turned off the hose. He coiled it neatly, everything in its place. That was Derek's way. Order above all else. He walked to the back door and unlocked it. Then he retrieved a towel from inside and held it out to her. Not to warm her, not to comfort her, just to dry her off before she entered the house. "The floors," he reminded her. Caroline took the towel with shaking hands. She dried herself mechanically. Her mind had gone somewhere far away. A survival instinct she had developed over 3 years of marriage. Inside, the house was warm. The contrast made her skin prickle painfully as blood rushed back to her extremities. She walked directly to the master bathroom. Her wet footprints left a trail on the hardwood. She would have to clean those too. She ran a bath, hot, as hot as she could stand. Steam filled the room. She climbed in, still wearing her wet nightgown. She couldn't manage the buttons. Her fingers wouldn't cooperate. The heat seeped into her bones slowly, too slowly. Her belly ached with Braxton Hicks contractions. The stress had triggered them. She placed both hands on her daughter and felt her moving, still alive, still fighting. "I'm sorry," Caroline whispered to her baby. "I'm so sorry." She sat in the bath for a long time. The water cooled. She added more hot water. It cooled again. She didn't move. She stared at her hands beneath the surface. Her engagement ring glinted. 3 carats, Derek's grandmother's setting. It had felt like a fairy tale when he gave it to her. Now it felt like a shackle. When did I become this woman? The thought surfaced unbidden. Carolyn caught herself doing what she always did after these incidents. Making excuses, building explanations. Derek was under pressure at work. The Hendricks deal had fallen through. She should have been more careful. She knew how he felt about the floors. The excuses lined up like soldiers in her mind. Ready to defend her husband, ready to blame herself. Then she stopped. Her daughter kicked again. Hard, insistent. Carolyn placed her hand on that spot. She felt the outline of a tiny foot pressing against her palm. A foot that had never touched the ground. A foot that had done nothing wrong. A foot that had been subjected to freezing water because Caroline had tracked imaginary mud across expensive marble. No, no more excuses. The realization settled over her like the steam rising from the bath. She had been making excuses for 3 years, explaining away the insults, justifying the isolation, rationalizing the control that had tightened around her life like a noose. But this was different. This was her daughter. This was an unborn child being punished for something she hadn't done. Carolyn stayed in the bath until her skin pruned. She counted her daughter's movements. She named the parts of her body that hurt. Fingers, toes, the place in her chest where love used to live. Somewhere in the house, a camera recorded everything. Caroline didn't know about it, not yet. But the tiny red light blinked in the darkness of the backyard. It had captured every second of the garden hose. Every shiver, every plea, every moment of her husband's calculated cruelty. Her father had insisted on that camera, a wedding gift she had laughed about. Security, he had called it. She hadn't understood what he meant. She would soon. The bathroom door opened. Derek appeared in the doorway. He had changed into his silk pajamas. His hair was freshly combed. He looked like a man preparing for a peaceful night's sleep. He walked to the tub and knelt beside it. He reached out and brushed a strand of wet hair from Caroline's face. His touch was gentle, almost loving. "I'm sorry you made me do that," he said softly. "You know I hate punishing you." Caroline looked at her husband, the man she had married, the father of her child. She searched his face for some sign of remorse, some flicker of guilt, some indication that he understood what he had done. She found nothing. His eyes were calm, patient, the eyes of someone waiting for the correct response. She had learned these cues over 3 years. She knew what he expected. "I know," she said. "I'll be more careful." Derek smiled. He kissed her forehead. The gesture was tender. An observer would have seen a devoted husband comforting his pregnant wife. "That's my girl," he said. "Come to bed when you're ready. I have an early meeting tomorrow." He left. The door clicked, shut behind him. Carolyn sat in the cooling water. She didn't cry. She had stopped crying after these incidents about 2 years ago. The tears accomplished nothing. They only made Derek uncomfortable. But something had shifted inside her. Something small but significant, like a crack forming in a dam. She looked at her belly, at the life growing inside her, at the daughter who would enter a world where her mother allowed herself to be sprayed with freezing water for tracking mud that didn't exist. What would she tell this child? What example was she setting? What future was she creating? Carolyn didn't have answers yet, but she had something she hadn't felt in a very long time. A question, a doubt. A tiny seed of resistance taking root in the barren soil of her marriage. She got out of the bath eventually. She dried off with a fresh towel. She cleaned her wet footprints from the floor. She put on dry pajamas and climbed into bed beside her sleeping husband. Derek was already snoring. The peaceful sleep of a man unburdened by conscience. Caroline lay awake for hours. She stared at the ceiling. She felt her daughter kick and squirm. She listened to the wind outside and imagined she could still feel the cold water on her skin. Somewhere in the darkness, a camera continued recording. 6 months of footage stored on a secure server, 47 documented incidents of abuse, evidence that would eventually destroy Derek Mercer completely. But Caroline didn't know that yet. All she knew was that something had to change. And for the first time in 3 years, she was ready to let it. The charity gala had been her idea. 3 years earlier, the Ashford Foundation headquarters. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the marble floor. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner. 300 of Connecticut's wealthiest citizens mingled with champagne flutes and calculated smiles. Carolyn stood near the silent auction table, adjusting the placement cards she had spent 3 hours arranging. She was 28 years old, recently returned from 6 months in Guatemala, thinner than when she left, quieter too. The humanitarian mission had changed her. She had helped build water purification systems in villages where children died from preventable diseases. She had held mothers' hands while they buried sons and daughters. She had seen poverty that made her family's wealth feel obscene. Now she was back in her father's world. The world of black tie galas and tax-deductible donations. The world where people wrote checks instead of getting their hands dirty. It felt hollow. All of it. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else. The voice came from behind her. Carolyn turned. He was tall, dark hair just long enough to suggest he didn't care about convention. A suit that fit perfectly without screaming designer labels. A smile that reached his eyes. "Is it that obvious?" she asked. "Only to someone paying attention." He extended his hand. "Derek Mercer. Caroline Ashford. I know who you are." He gestured at the foundation logo decorating every surface. "Kinda hard to miss." She laughed. It felt foreign. She hadn't laughed much since coming home. "So you're one of my father's business associates?" she asked. "God, no." Derek's nose wrinkled in mock offense. "I'm far too disreputable for William Ashford. I'm just a tech investor who wrote a check big enough to get past the door." "Self-made money," Carolyn nodded approvingly. "My father would say that's the only kind worth having." "Would he now?" Derek tilted his head. "And what would you say?" Carolyn considered the question. Most men at these events talked about their boats or their golf handicaps. They asked her about her dress or her vacation plans. No one asked what she thought about anything. "I'd say money is just a tool," she answered finally. "What matters is what you build with it." Something shifted in Derek's expression. Interest, she thought. Genuine interest. "What did you build in Guatemala?" he asked. Carolyn stared at him. "How did you know about Guatemala?" "I do my research." He shrugged. "Water purification systems for rural villages. Quite impressive for someone who could have spent 6 months on a yacht." "Most people at these events talk about their yachts," she said slowly. "You asked about water purification systems. Clean water is more interesting than yachts." His smile was warm, open, nothing like the practiced expressions of the trust fund boys she had grown up with, nothing like the men her mother kept introducing her to. The appropriate men, the suitable matches. Derek Mercer was different. At least, he seemed different. They talked for 3 hours that night about Guatemala, about his startup that had made him rich, about her dreams of expanding the foundation's work, about everything and nothing. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He made her laugh. He made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. When the gala ended, he asked for her number. When she gave it, he called the next day. Not 3 days later, not a week, the next morning. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," he said. "Is that too forward?" It was. She didn't care. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Coffee dates that turned into dinner dates that turned into weekend trips. He brought her flowers that weren't roses because he had listened when she mentioned loving peonies. He remembered the name of her childhood cat. He asked about her grandmother's recipes. 6 months in, he proposed. A first edition bookshop in Paris. Her favorite place in the world. He had done his research. "I've never met anyone like you," he said, down on one knee between shelves of Hemingway and Fitzgerald. "You make me want to be a better man. Will you marry me?" She said yes. Of course she said yes. The engagement announcement made the society pages. Caroline Ashford, philanthropist and heiress, to wed Derek Mercer, self-made tech millionaire. The fairy tale was complete. Almost. There was one dinner, a week before the wedding. Her parents had thus thought. Her father had been quiet throughout the meal, watching Derek with eyes that missed nothing. Afterward, William Ashford pulled his daughter aside. Something about him, sweetheart. His voice was low, private. I can't put my finger on it. Carolyn bristled. You always do this. You never think anyone is good enough. That's not what I said. He makes me happy, Dad. Isn't that enough? William studied her face for a long moment. Then he sighed. If you're happy, I'm happy. But promise me something. What? If anything ever goes wrong, anything at all, you come to me immediately, no matter what. She had promised. At the time, she thought it was just paternal overprotection. Her father, the billionaire, trying to control everything, even her heart. Now, 3 years later, sitting in a cooling bathtub with the memory of freezing water still on her skin, Caroline remembered that conversation differently. Something about him. Her father had seen it, right from the beginning. The honeymoon had been the first sign. Bali, a luxury resort, paradise by any objective measure. The first incident happened on day 3. They had been scuba diving. The instructor, a handsome Australian named Jake, had helped Caroline with her equipment. He had made a joke. She had laughed. That night, Derek didn't speak to her for 6 hours. Complete silence. He sat on the balcony, staring at the ocean, refusing to acknowledge her existence. What's wrong? She asked finally, desperately. You know what you did? She didn't. She genuinely didn't. But she apologized anyway. He forgave her eventually. He was gracious about it, understanding even. I just love you so much, he explained. When I see another man making you laugh, it's like a knife in my heart. She felt guilty for making him feel that way. She vowed to be more careful. There were other signs, small ones, easy to dismiss. His irritation when she ordered dessert. You want to look good in the photos, don't you? His correction of her pronunciation in front of the hotel concierge. It's pronounced reservation, darling, not reservation. The way he moved her suitcase from her side of the bed without asking. I need to be closer to the door. Security purposes. Each incident was minor, insignificant, the kind of thing every couple negotiated, but they accumulated. After the honeymoon came the isolation. Subtle at first, Derek preferred to spend time alone together rather than with her friends. He thought her college roommates were immature. He felt her cousin was a bad influence. I just want you to myself, he would say. Is that so wrong? It wasn't wrong, it was romantic. At least, that's what Caroline told herself. Then came the criticisms. Her cooking wasn't quite right. Her housekeeping wasn't thorough enough. Her conversation at dinner parties was too quiet or too loud or too something. She tried harder. She took cooking classes. She hired better housekeepers. She practiced what to say at social events. Nothing was ever good enough. The first time he grabbed her arm, she had excused herself. He had been drinking. The business deal had fallen through. He was stressed. Anyone would be upset. The bruises faded. She wore long sleeves until they did. The first time he called her stupid, she had cried alone in the bathroom. Then she had fixed her makeup and pretended it hadn't happened. The first time he locked her out of the bedroom for forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning. She had slept on the couch and told herself it was her fault. 3 years of small incidents. 3 years of adjustments and accommodations and excuses. 3 years of becoming someone she didn't recognize. And now this, the garden hose, the freezing water, the baby kicking in distress. In the bathtub, Caroline watched the water swirl around her. She thought about the woman she used to be, the woman who had built water systems in Guatemala, the woman who had dreams and opinions and a backbone. That woman felt like a stranger now. I kept waiting for him to become the man I thought he was. The thought crystallized slowly, painfully. But that man never existed. The Derek she had married was a performance, a carefully constructed character designed to win her trust. The charming questions, the thoughtful gestures, the passionate declarations of love, all of it had been manipulation. She had been auditioning for a role she didn't understand, and when she got the part, the script changed completely. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. She reached for it with pruned fingers. A text from her father. Call me when you can, sweetheart, whenever you're ready. Caroline stared at the message. It was 2 in the morning. Her father should be asleep, But William Ashford wasn't sleeping. He was sitting in his home office, watching surveillance footage on a secure laptop, watching his pregnant daughter being sprayed with freezing water while her husband circled her like a predator. He had been watching for 6 months, documenting everything, waiting for Caroline to be ready. She wasn't ready yet, but she was closer than she had ever been. Morning light filled the kitchen like a broken promise. Carolyn moved through her routine mechanically. Coffee brewing, toast in the toaster, prenatal vitamins lined up on the counter. The motions of a normal day in a normal life. Derek had already left. A note on the kitchen island in his precise handwriting. Early meeting, don't forget. My mother for dinner tonight. Please look presentable. Please look presentable. As if she might greet his mother in her bathrobe. As if she hadn't spent 3 years perfecting the art of looking exactly how Derek wanted her to look. Carolyn picked up the note. Read it again. Set it down carefully in exactly the same position. Derek noticed when things were moved. Her phone buzzed. Then again. Then 17 times in rapid succession. Maggie. Margaret Holloway had been Caroline's roommate at Yale, her best friend for 15 years. The maid of honor at her wedding. The one person Derek hadn't managed to completely isolate from her life. Caroline answered on the third ring. It's 7 in the morning, Mags. Where are you? Maggie's voice was shaking. Are you alone? I'm at home. Derek left early. What's wrong? Caroline, I need you to listen to me carefully. There's a woman at my office right now. Her name is Victoria Lane. She says she's Derek's executive assistant. I know Victoria. I've met her at company events. She says she has something you need to see. Evidence, Caro, bank accounts, emails. Maggie paused. She says Derek has been stealing from your father's company for years. The kitchen swam. Caroline gripped the counter to steady herself. That's impossible. That's what I said, but she has documents, a lot of documents. Why would she bring this to you? Because she was sleeping with him. Maggie's voice dropped. She says Derek told her he was getting a divorce, that you were unstable, that you had trapped him with a pregnancy. Carolyn sat down slowly. The toast popped up in the toaster. She didn't move to get it. Maggie, are you sure about this? I need you to come to my office, now. Don't tell Derek anything, just come. The drive took 40 minutes. Caroline's hands shook on the steering wheel the entire way. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting Derek's car to appear behind her. Maggie's law office occupied the top floor of a downtown building. Security let Caroline up immediately. They knew her face. She had been coming to lunch here for years. The conference room door was closed. Maggie waited outside it. Before you go in, Maggie said, taking Caroline's hands, I need you to know that whatever happens, I'm here. No judgment, no questions, just support. You're scaring me. Good, you should be scared. But not of me, never of me. They went in together. Victoria Lane sat at the conference table. She was 29, beautiful in an angular professional way. Her suit was designer. Her posture was rigid. Her eyes were rimmed with red. Mrs. Mercer. Victoria stood. Thank you for coming. Why are you doing this? Carolyn asked. If you were sleeping with my husband, why would you help me? Victoria's jaw tightened. Because I found out it wasn't the only one. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, email printouts, the kind of documentation that took months to compile. Caroline read through them slowly. The numbers blurred, the names swam, but the pattern was clear. Derek had been siphoning money from the joint ventures between his company and Ashford Industries. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, nearly $4 million over 3 years, hidden in offshore accounts, funneled through shell corporations. He was stealing from my father, Carolyn said flatly. Yes. And you helped him? Victoria flinched. I processed the paperwork. I didn't know what it was at first. By the time I figured it out, I was in too deep. And I thought, she stopped, swallowed. I thought he loved me. I thought we had a future. What changed? I found out about the other woman. Carolyn's hands stopped on the documents. There's someone besides you? Her name is Cynthia Reed. She lives in Boston. Victoria's voice was barely audible. She's 8 months pregnant with Derek's son. The words hung in the air. Caroline heard them, processed them, felt them land somewhere deep in her chest. Another woman, another pregnancy, another lie. How long? She asked. 2 years. They met at a conference in Miami. 2 years? Caroline's laugh was hollow. We were already married. I know. I was already pregnant when they met. I know. Caroline looked down at the folder in her hands. Bank statements, wire transfers, proof of infidelity, proof of fraud. 3 years of lies documented in black and white. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. The woman Derek called his wife. The woman he had sprayed with freezing water just 12 hours ago. That woman would have cried, would have screamed, would have collapsed under the weight of this betrayal. But something had shifted in Caroline. Something small but significant. The crack in the dam had widened. What do you want? She asked Victoria. Why bring this to me? I want him to pay for what he's done. Victoria's voice hardened. Not just to you, to all of us. He made me believe I was special. He made me compromise my ethics, my career, my self-respect. She paused. And then he did the exact same thing to another woman, while promising us both he would leave you. Carolyn nodded slowly. And Cynthia? Does she know? Not yet. I thought you should decide how to handle this. Silence filled the conference room. Maggie reached over and squeezed Caroline's hand. The gesture was small. It meant everything. Carolyn thought about the garden hose, the freezing water, the way Derek had handed her a towel to protect his precious floors. That's what I am to him. Something to wipe his feet on. The thought emerged fully formed, clear as glass. I need to see my father, Carolyn said finally. He needs to know about the embezzlement. Your father already knows. Carolyn turned. A man had appeared in the doorway, tall, silver-haired, dressed in a suit that cost more than most people's cars. William Ashford stepped into the conference room. His face was calm, controlled, but his eyes held something Caroline had never seen before. Rage, pure paternal rage. Daddy? Her voice came out small, childlike. William crossed the room in 3 strides. He pulled his daughter into his arms, held her tight. She could feel him trembling. I've seen the footage, sweetheart, he whispered. All of it. Every night for the past 6 months. Graham installed cameras in the security system. I watched him spray you with that hose. I watched everything. Carolyn pulls him out. What footage? There are cameras throughout your house. The backyard, the kitchen, the living room. William's jaw tightened. 47 documented incidents of abuse. The garden hose was just the beginning. The room tilted. Carolyn gripped her father's arms to steady herself. You've been watching? We've been documenting. Building a case. Waiting for you to be ready. William cupped her face in his hands. I wanted to kill him, Caroline. Every night, watching those videos, I wanted to put a bullet in his head. But that wouldn't have protected you. That wouldn't have destroyed him properly. Destroyed him? Harrison Cole is flying in from New York, the best divorce attorney in the country. We're going to take everything from Derek Mercer. His money, his reputation, his freedom. William's voice dropped to steel. He's never going to touch you or my granddaughter again. Carolyn looked around the room, at her father, at Maggie, at Victoria, who had risked everything to bring them the truth. For 3 years, she had felt alone. For 3 years, she had believed she was the only one who could see what was happening, the only one who carried the weight of her failing marriage. She had been wrong. All this time, people had been watching, gathering evidence, preparing to save her. She just hadn't been ready to be saved. Her phone buzzed in her purse. A text from Derek. Where are you? You've been gone for hours. Don't make me worried about you. You know how I get when I'm worried. Carolyn read the message. Read it again. She knew exactly how he got when he was worried. That was the problem. I need to go home, she said. He'll be suspicious if I'm gone too long. You're not going back there, William said flatly. I have to, just for a little while. We need him to think everything is normal. Carolyn straightened her spine, drew on reserves of strength she had forgotten she possessed. Give me a week. Let me gather what I need. Then we take him down. Maggie and William exchanged glances. Neither of them liked it. but they saw something in Caroline's face that made them trust her. 1 week, William agreed. Graham will be watching. The cameras will catch everything. If he touches you again, we move immediately. Caroline nodded. She picked up her purse, checked her reflection in the conference room window, smoothed her hair, fixed her expression. The mask she wore for Derek slipped back into place. Perfect, practiced, undetectable. But underneath it, something new was growing. Not fear, not despair. Hope. For the first time in 3 years, Carolyn Ashford Mercer had hope. The surveillance footage played on the large screen in William Ashford's private study. Caroline watched herself on camera. A tiny figure in the backyard, arms wrapped around her pregnant belly, water cascading over her shoulders. She watched Derek circle her, saw him adjust the spray, heard his calm, reasonable voice through the speakers. You tracked mud on the Carrera marble. You know how I feel about the floors. On screen, Caroline from last night shivered, begged, apologized. Present-day Caroline sat motionless. Her hands rested on her belly. Her face showed nothing. That's enough, William said. He stopped the footage. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly on the remote. Graham Whitfield, head of Ashford Security, cleared his throat. There are 47 documented incidents over 6 months. Physical assault, verbal abuse, psychological manipulation, financial coercion. Financial coercion? Carolyn asked. He's been limiting your access to your own accounts. The joint account allows him to monitor every transaction. Your personal cards have spending limits that require his approval. Carolyn frowned. I didn't set spending limits. He did, without telling you. Another layer of control, another string pulled tight. Carolyn had thought she was careless with money. Derek always sighed when she bought something unnecessary. She had learned to ask permission without realizing she was asking permission. Show me more, she said. Graham hesitated, looked at William. Show her, William said. She needs to see all of it. The footage continued. Caroline watched herself being berated for serving dinner late, watched Derek grab her arm hard enough to leave bruises, watched herself being locked out of the bedroom, watched the slow, systematic destruction of her confidence documented in high definition. I don't remember half of this, she said quietly. I remember it happening, but I don't remember how bad it was. That's common. Eleanor Ashford had entered the study silently. She sat beside her daughter and took her hand. When you're living through it, your mind protects you. It minimizes. It normalizes. That's how we survive. Carolyn looked at her mother. How do you know? Eleanor's smile was sad. Because I survived it too, a long time ago, before I met your father. You never told me. I never wanted you to know. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. I thought if I raised you strong enough, loved you enough, you would never find yourself in that situation. I was wrong. It wasn't your fault, Carolyn whispered. It wasn't yours either. They sat together, mother and daughter, survivors of different men, different eras, the same pattern of abuse. Graham continued his briefing. The scope of Derek's deception was staggering. The embezzlement from Ashford Industries totaled $4 million. The money was hidden in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Shell corporations created specifically to move funds, a paper trail that Graham's team had spent months tracing. The second family in Boston was documented in photographs. Cynthia Reed, 34 years old, 8 months pregnant with Derek's son, living in a brownstone that Derek paid for in cash, engagement ring on her finger, wedding plan for spring. Derek had intended to divorce Caroline after the baby was born. The timing was calculated. Connecticut law would require him to pay child support, but if he could establish custody, he could control the child's trust fund. The Ashford grandchildren would inherit significant money at 25. Derek had been positioning himself to access it for years. He married me for the money, Caroline said. The words tasted like ash. He married you for access to the family, William corrected. The business partnerships, the social connections, the trust funds that would come with children. His jaw tightened. You were never a person to him. You were an investment. Harrison Cole arrived that evening, 70 years old, silver hair, the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. He reviewed the evidence in William's study, made notes, asked questions. His face revealed nothing. "Your husband is remarkably stupid," he said finally. Caroline blinked. "Excuse me?" "The offshore accounts are poorly concealed. The shell corporations have paper trails a first-year associate could follow. The surveillance footage is legally admissible since the cameras were installed in a property owned by your father." Harrison set down his pen. "He's been committing crimes in front of documented evidence for 6 months. Either he thought he was untouchable, or he genuinely believed you would never fight back." "He thought I was weak," Carolyn said quietly. "Were you?" The question hung in the air. Harrison watched her with sharp eyes, evaluating, assessing. "I was scared," Carolyn answered. "I was isolated. I was systematically undermined until I couldn't trust my own perceptions. But I was never weak." Harrison nodded slowly. "Good. Because this will require strength. He won't surrender quietly. He'll attack. He'll manipulate. He'll try to destroy your credibility." He leaned forward. "Can you handle that?" "I can handle anything he throws at me, even if he uses your child against you." Carolyn's hand went to her belly. The baby kicked in response. "Especially then." Harrison almost smiled. "I represented your mother 35 years ago. She escaped her first marriage with nothing but her dignity. I've spent my career making sure women like her leave with everything they deserve." He stood, extended his hand. "Welcome to your divorce, Mrs. Mercer. By the time we're done, your husband won't have a reputation, an asset, or a moment of peace left to his name." That night, Caroline slept in her childhood bedroom. Pink walls she had chosen at 8 years old. Bookshelves filled with novels she had loved at 15. A window seat where she had dreamed of her future at 20. She had dreamed of love, of partnership, of children who would grow up in homes filled with warmth and safety. The dream had been distorted, corrupted, turned into something unrecognizable. But it wasn't dead. Carolyn placed her hand on her belly, felt her daughter move. This child would know a different future, a better one, even if Caroline had to burn her entire life down to build it. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Derek again. "Where are you? Your car is gone. Call me." She typed back carefully. "At my parents' house. Felt dizzy. Mom insisted I stay. Home tomorrow." A pause, then, "You should have told me. I was worried." "I know, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just come home soon. I miss you. I miss both of my girls." Carolyn stared at the message. Both of my girls, as if he cared, as if any of his affection was real. She knew now what he was. The evidence was overwhelming. The pattern was undeniable. But there was still a part of her that wanted it to be a mistake. That hope the Derek she had married existed somewhere beneath the monster she had discovered. That part of her was dying. Slowly, painfully, but not fast enough. I thought I was the problem. The realization surfaced in the darkness. Caroline lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, counting her daughter's movements. All this time, I thought if I just tried harder, loved better, was more patient. She had twisted herself into knots trying to make Derek happy, changed her hair, her clothes, her friends, her dreams, shrunk herself smaller and smaller to fit into the box he had built for her. It was never going to be enough, because the box kept getting smaller. The requirements kept changing. The goalposts kept moving. Derek didn't want her to succeed. He wanted her to fail, because her failures justified his cruelty. Her failures kept her dependent. Her failures were the foundation of his control. I was never the problem. Carolyn closed her eyes. Let the truth wash over her like warm water. He made me believe I was the problem. That was the whole point. Sleep came eventually, deep and dreamless. The first real rest she had gotten in months. Tomorrow she would return to her husband. She would smile and apologize and play the role he expected. But she would be acting now, consciously, deliberately. The mask would be her weapon. The performance would be her shield. And when the time came, she would destroy him. Boston in winter was all gray stone and bare trees. Caroline sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Cynthia Reed's brownstone. She had told Derek she was visiting a college friend. He had been suspicious, but hadn't stopped her. The pregnancy protected her somewhat. Derek was careful about appearances. A pregnant wife traveling alone looked independent. A pregnant wife locked in the house looked controlled. Maggie had made the introduction. Victoria had provided the address. The rest was up to Caroline. The door opened. A woman entered. 8 months pregnant, dark circles under her eyes, a cashmere coat that didn't quite hide the exhaustion in her posture. Cynthia Reed looked around the coffee shop, found Caroline, paused. They studied each other across the room. Two women pregnant by the same man, two victims of the same lies. Cynthia walked over slowly. She sat down across from Caroline. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. "I thought I would hate you," Cynthia said finally. Her voice was raw, honest. "For 2 years, I've been imagining the woman Derek described. Unstable, manipulative, trapping him with a pregnancy he didn't want." "Is that what he told you?" "That's exactly what he told me." Cynthia's laugh was bitter. "He said you were mentally ill, that he stayed out of obligation, that once the baby was born, he would finally be free." Carolyn nodded slowly. "He told me he worked late, that business trips took him away, that his assistant was just very dedicated." "His assistant?" Cynthia flinched. "Victoria. She's the one who told me about you. She thought she was special too." They sat in silence. The coffee shop hummed around them. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the drama unfolding at the corner table. "He hit me once," Cynthia said quietly. "Just once, after I questioned why he couldn't stay the night. He said I was being paranoid, controlling. Then he grabbed my arm and shoved me against the wall." "What did you do?" "I apologized." The word dripped with shame. "I told myself it was my fault. I had pushed too hard, asked too many questions. I promised to be better." Caroline reached across the table, took Cynthia's hand. "That's what he wanted you to think. That's what he trained you to think. I know that now." Cynthia's eyes filled with tears. "But knowing it doesn't make me feel less stupid." "You're not stupid. You fell in love with someone who doesn't exist. We both did. How can you be so calm about this?" Carolyn considered the question. A week ago, she would have been destroyed by this conversation. A week ago, she would have seen Cynthia as the enemy. But something had changed. The evidence, the footage, the systematic documentation of Derek's cruelty. It had shifted her perspective. Cynthia wasn't the enemy. She never had been. They were mirrors of each other. Different women, same trap. "I'm calm because being angry at you accomplishes nothing," Carolyn said. "He's the one who lied. He's the one who manipulated. He's the one who promised us both things he never intended to deliver. What do you want from me?" "I want you to help me destroy him." The words landed between them. Cynthia's eyes widened. "Destroy him how?" "Legally, completely. I have evidence of financial crimes, embezzlement, fraud. I have surveillance footage of domestic abuse." Carolyn leaned forward. "What I need is witnesses, women willing to testify about who Derek really is." "You want me to testify against the father of my child?" "I want you to protect your child from his father." Carolyn's voice hardened. "Derek doesn't love us. He doesn't love our children. He sees all of us as assets, investments, things to be managed and controlled." Cynthia looked down at her belly. Her hand moved protectively over it. "If I testify, he'll never forgive me. If you don't testify, he'll do this to someone else, another woman, another pregnancy, another family built on lies." Silence stretched between them. Carolyn waited. She had learned patience over 3 years, the hard way. "I have recordings," Cynthia said finally. "Voice messages, texts. One time he berated me for gaining too much pregnancy weight. I recorded it because I don't know why. Maybe some part of me knew." "Can I hear it?" Cynthia pulled out her phone, found the file, pressed play. Derek's voice filled the space between them. Calm, reasonable, devastating. "Look at yourself, Cynthia. You're supposed to be carrying my son, my heir, and you're eating like a pig. Do you think I want a fat wife? Do you think anyone wants to look at that?" The recording continued for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of detailed criticism. 3 minutes of psychological assault disguised as concern. When it ended, both women were crying. He says the same things to me, Carolyn whispered, almost word for word, like he has a script. Maybe he does. They talked for 2 hours, shared stories, compared notes, found patterns in Derek's behavior that neither had recognized alone. The love bombing at the beginning, the slow isolation, the systematic undermining of confidence, the moments of tenderness that kept them hoping, the punishments that kept them afraid. It was textbook, horrifyingly textbook. I was so isolated, Cynthia said. He made me move to a new city, said it would be better for his business. I didn't realize he was separating me from everyone who might see through him. He did the same to me. My friends were too immature. My family was too controlling. He became my whole world. On purpose. Always on purpose. Carolyn finished her cold coffee. He doesn't make mistakes. Every action is calculated. Every word is chosen. The cruelty isn't loss of control. It's the entire point. Cynthia nodded slowly. What happens now? Now we build a case. You, me, Victoria. Anyone else we can find. Derek didn't start with us. Men like him never do. There are others? There's an ex-fiancée in California, Brittany Marsh. She settled quietly years ago. Victoria found her. How many women has he done this to? I don't know, but we're going to find out. They parted with a long embrace. 2 pregnant women, 2 survivors. 2 mothers-to-be who would fight for their children's futures. Carolyn drove back to Connecticut alone. The winter landscape blurred past her windows. Gray and white and brown, the colors of endings. But endings were also beginnings. Her phone buzzed. Derek. Where are you? You've been gone all day. She typed back, heading home now. Traffic is bad. I made dinner reservations for us tonight. 7 o'clock. Wear the blue dress, the one I bought you. Always telling her what to wear, even now, even when his world was about to collapse. Carolyn didn't argue, didn't question. The blue dress it would be. She pulled into a rest stop near the Connecticut border, sat in her car, watched the sun set over bare trees. I thought I'd hate her. The realization surfaced quietly. Carolyn had expected to feel jealousy, rage, betrayal. Instead, she felt kinship, understanding, recognition. She's not the enemy. She never was. Her daughter kicked inside her, a strong movement, impatient. I know, baby, Caroline whispered. I know you want out. Soon. I promise. But first there was work to do. Derek Mercer had built his empire on lies, on manipulation, on the systematic destruction of women who loved him. That empire was about to fall, and Caroline would be the one holding the match. The restaurant was quiet, elegant, the kind of place where Derek liked to be seen. Carolyn wore the blue dress he had chosen. She had done her hair the way he preferred, applied makeup to cover the shadows under her eyes, perfected the mask until she barely recognized herself. Derek sat across from her, ordering wine for himself and water for her, selecting dishes without asking her preference, making conversation with the waiter like a man who owned the room. You've been distant lately, he said once they were alone, spending a lot of time with your parents. I'm 34 weeks pregnant. I'm tired. You're always tired. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm starting to wonder if something else is going on. Caroline's heart rate spiked. She kept her face calm. What do you mean? You canceled dinner with my mother. You've missed 2 charity committee meetings. You went to Boston without telling me. He leaned forward. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were hiding something. I'm not hiding anything. Then why won't you look at me? She forced herself to meet his gaze. Blue eyes, cold as winter lakes. She had once thought those eyes were beautiful. Now she saw the predator behind them. I'm looking at you, Derek. He studied her face, searching for cracks in her composure, finding none. Good. He leaned back. I worry about you, that's all. The pregnancy hormones, the stress, I just want to try to take care of you. I know you do. The food arrived. Caroline ate mechanically. Each bite tasted like cardboard. This is the last time, she told herself. The last dinner, the last performance. Tomorrow it ends. Harrison Cole was filing the divorce papers in the morning. The criminal complaint was going to the district attorney on Wednesday. By Friday, Derek Mercer would be arrested. One more night. She just had to survive one more night. They drove home in silence. Derek's hand rested on her thigh, possessive. The weight of it made her skin crawl. At the house, Derek poured himself another drink. Caroline went upstairs to change. The blue dress fell to the floor like a shed skin. She was in the bathroom when she heard his footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate, the walk of a man with intention. The door opened. Derek stood in the doorway. His tie was loosened. His drink was empty. "I know," he said. Caroline's blood turned to ice. "Know what?" "I know you went to Boston." He stepped closer. "I know you met with Cynthia." The room tilted. Caroline gripped the bathroom counter. "How? You think you're the only one with surveillance?" Derek's laugh was cold. "I've been tracking your phone for years. Every location, every stop, every minute." Caroline's mind raced. The coffee shop, Cynthia's brownstone, the rest stop where she had cried. He knew everything. He had always known everything. "Derek, let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been sneaking around behind my back? That you've been conspiring with my mistresses?" He grabbed her arm. Hard, the same spot he always grabbed. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you were smarter than me? You're hurting me." "Good." He shoved her against the wall. Her head cracked against the tile. Star burst behind her eyes. "You've been planning something. You and your father and your pathetic little friends. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" "Derek, the baby." "The baby." His laugh was ugly. "You think I care about that baby? You think I want a daughter? I needed a son, an heir. Instead, you give me this." He gestured at her belly with disgust. "Useless, just like you." Caroline's vision blurred, partly from the impact, partly from tears she couldn't stop. "I loved you," she whispered. "I gave you everything." "You gave me nothing." Derek's face was inches from hers. His breath smelled like scotch. "Your father's money, your family's connections. That's all you were ever good for. And now you're trained to take it all away from me?" He raised his hand. Caroline closed her eyes. The doorbell rang. Derek froze. His hand stayed suspended in the air. The doorbell rang again, then a pounding on the front door. Then a voice, Derek Mercer, "This is the police. Open the door." The color drained from Derek's face. His hand dropped to his side. "What did you do?" he hissed. "I didn't do anything." Caroline's voice shook. "I don't know why they're here." The pounding continued. "Open up now. We have a warrant." Derek's eyes darted around the bathroom, calculating, planning, looking for escape. But there was no escape. He straightened his tie, smoothed his hair. The mask slid back into place with terrifying speed. "Stay here," he ordered. "Don't say a word to anyone." He walked downstairs. Caroline heard the front door open. Voices. Derek's, calm and reasonable. Another voice, official and firm. "Derek Mercer, you are under arrest for domestic assault, financial fraud, and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The words floated up the stairs. Caroline stood in the bathroom, shaking. Her head throbbed where it had hit the tile. Her arm ached where he had grabbed her. Footsteps on the stairs. Not Derek's, slower, more careful. Graham Whitfield appeared in the doorway. His face was grim but controlled. "Mrs. Mercer, are you hurt?" "He hit me, my head. He was going to—" "I know." Graham's voice was gentle. "We were watching. The cameras caught everything." "How did the police know to come?" "Your father made a call. The footage from tonight pushed up the timeline." Graham stepped closer. "We need to get you to a hospital. The baby needs to be checked." Carolyn nodded numbly. She let Graham guide her down the stairs, past the living room where police officers gathered evidence, through the front door into the cold night air. On the driveway, Derek stood in handcuffs. His suit was rumpled. His hair was disheveled. He looked small, diminished. Their eyes met. "This isn't over," he said. His voice was calm, controlled. The voice of a man who believed he would win. "You think you can destroy me? You're nothing, Caroline. You've always been nothing." Caroline stopped. She looked at her husband, really looked at him. The charm was gone. The mask had finally shattered. Beneath it, there was nothing. No remorse, no love, no humanity, just emptiness wearing a human face. "You're wrong," she said quietly. I'm everything you'll never have, and you're nothing you always were. The officers put Derek in the back of their car. The door slammed shut. Caroline watched the taillights disappear down the driveway. Her head was pounding. Her arm was bruising. Contractions were starting. Real ones. Strong ones. But she was still standing. And Derek Mercer was gone. The ambulance came 20 minutes later. Carolyn lay on a stretcher, watching the ceiling of the emergency vehicle pass overhead in fluorescent strips. The paramedics spoke in calm, professional voices. Blood pressure, fetal heart rate, contractions every 3 minutes. Too early, one of them said. She's only 34 weeks. The baby has other ideas. At the hospital, everything happened fast. Doctors and nurses and machines that beeped and whirred. Eleanor arrived first, then William. Then Maggie, still in her work clothes. The baby's in distress, Dr. Thornton explained. We need to deliver now. The trauma and stress have accelerated things. Carolyn nodded. She was beyond fear now, beyond exhaustion. There was only the next moment and the next and the next. They wheeled her into surgery. The lights were bright. The room was cold. You're going to be okay, Dr. Thornton said. Your daughter is going to be okay. Caroline closed her eyes. She thought about the garden hose, the freezing water, the moment she had decided things needed to change. If that night hadn't happened, if she hadn't been pushed to her breaking point, she might still be in that house, still making excuses, still believing she was the problem. Sometimes destruction was the beginning of creation. The surgery was quick, professional. She felt pressure, but no pain. Then a sound cut through the sterile silence. A cry, thin and strong, the first breath of a new life. It's a girl, Dr. Thornton announces, small but healthy. She's a fighter. They placed her on Caroline's chest, a tiny body, wispy dark hair, eyes screwed shut against the light. 4 pounds, 6 ounces, 8 weeks early, but alive, breathing. Here. Hi, baby, Caroline whispered. Hi, I'm your mom. The baby's hand opened and closed, tiny fingers grasping at nothing, finding Caroline's finger, holding on. What's her name? A nurse asked. Caroline had thought about this for months, gone through lists, asked Derek's opinion, changed her mind 100 times. But now, in this moment, there was only one name that mattered. Aurora, she said. Her name is Aurora. Dawn, the light after the long night. In the NICU, Aurora slept in an incubator. Tubes and wires connected to her small body. Monitors beeped steadily. Carolyn sat beside her, watching every breath. William and Eleanor took turns bringing food she didn't eat. Maggie brought books she didn't read. The hours blurred together. Day and night lost meaning. On the third day, Caroline's phone buzzed. Harrison Cole. The jury reached a verdict, he said. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing next month. Caroline stared at the phone. Guilty on all counts. The words should have meant something. Should have brought relief or satisfaction or closure. But sitting in the NICU, watching her daughter fight for every breath, she found she didn't care about Derek anymore. He was gone. That was enough. Thank you, she said to Harrison, for everything. Save your thanks until sentencing. I intend to bury him. They talked for a few more minutes. Details about the civil case. Updates on the asset freeze. Nothing that penetrated the bubble of the NICU. After she hung up, Caroline turned back to Aurora's incubator. Your father is going to prison, she said softly. I wish I could tell you he was a good man who made bad choices. But that would be a lie, Eco. Aurora's hand twitched in her sleep. I'll tell you the truth when you're older, all of it. But for now, just know this. Carolyn placed her hand against the incubator glass. You are wanted. You are loved. You are going to grow up knowing exactly how much you matter. The machines beeped steadily. Aurora's chest rose and fell. Outside the NICU, the sun was setting. Orange and pink light painted the hospital walls. Caroline watched it through the window, thought about everything that had brought her here. The charity gala where she met Derek. The whirlwind romance. The wedding she had thought was the beginning of forever. The first insult she had excused. The first bruise she had hidden. The first time she had apologized for someone else's cruelty. The garden hose. The freezing water. The moment she had decided no more. All of it had led to this room. This incubator, this tiny, perfect daughter, she had lost so much. 3 years of her life, her faith in love, her trust in her own judgment. But she had gained something too. Strength she didn't know she had, allies she hadn't expected, a future she was finally ready to build. I'm not who I was. The thought surfaced gently. Caroline let it settle. I'm not the woman who believed Derek's lies. I'm not the woman who made excuses for his cruelty. I'm not the woman who thought she deserved punishment for tracking imaginary mud across expensive floors. She looked at Aurora, at this small, fierce life she had created. I'm better. The realization didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet, simple, true. Aurora opened her eyes just for a moment, dark blue like all newborns, unfocused, but present. Hi, Carolyn whispered. Welcome to the world. It's not perfect, but we're going to make it better. Together. Aurora's eyes closed again. Her hand relaxed. The monitors beeped. The sun finished setting. Night fell over the hospital. And Caroline sat in the darkness, watching her daughter breathe, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, not happiness. Not yet. But peace, it was a beginning. 2 months later, the courtroom was packed. Caroline sat in the front row. Aurora, now 6 pounds and thriving, was safe at home with Eleanor. Today was not for the baby. Today was for justice. Derek Mercer stood at the defendant's table. His orange jumpsuit replaced the designer suits. His hair, usually perfectly styled, had grown shaggy. His face had thinned. Prison had not been kind to him. Harrison Cole had been thorough. The charges were numerous: domestic assault, financial fraud, wire fraud, child endangerment and impingement, embezzlement. The list went on. The evidence was overwhelming. 47 documented incidents of abuse on video, bank records showing years of theft, testimony from 5 women, each one with the same story, each one with the same scars. The jury had deliberated for 6 hours. They came back unanimous, guilty on all counts. Now came sentencing. Mr. Mercer, the judge was a woman in her 60s, silver hair, steel spine. Her eyes held no sympathy. You have been convicted of multiple felonies. Before I announce your sentence, do you have anything to say? Derek's lawyer whispered something in his ear. Derek shook his head. He stood, looked at the judge, then turned and looked directly at Caroline. My wife, he began. Your ex-wife, the judge corrected. My ex-wife has destroyed my life over a misunderstanding. Derek's voice was smooth, reasonable, the voice of a man accustomed to persuading. She took incidents out of context. She conspired with her wealthy family to manufacture evidence. I am the victim here. The courtroom stirred. Harrison Cole made a note on his legal pad. The videos you saw were edited, Derek continued. The women who testified were coached. Everything about this case was designed to take my money, my reputation, my freedom. His voice rose. I loved Caroline. I loved our family, and she repaid that love with betrayal. He was still talking when Caroline tuned him out. She had heard these words before. Different versions, but the same tune. Deny everything, attack the accusers, reverse victim and offender. It had worked on her for 3 years. It wouldn't work here. The judge listened impassively. When Derek finished, she paused for a long moment. Mr. Mercer, she said finally, I have reviewed the evidence in this case thoroughly. The surveillance footage is unedited. The financial records are verified. The testimony of 5 separate victims is consistent in ways that would be impossible to manufacture. She leaned forward. You are not a victim. You are a predator. You identified vulnerable women, gained their trust, and systematically destroyed them for your own financial and psychological benefit. The only reason you're standing in this courtroom instead of running free is because one of your victims had a father who could afford to document your crimes. Derek's face reddened. His composure cracked. That's not, you will not speak again. The judge's voice was ice. I am sentencing you to 15 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 10 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $12 million to your victims. The courtroom erupted. Voices rose. Cameras flashed. Derek turned to his lawyer, gesturing wildly. His words were lost in the chaos. Then his eyes found Caroline again. "This isn't over," he shouted as the guards moved toward him. "When I get out, you'll pay for this. You and your father and everyone who helped you. I'll destroy all of you." The judge banged her gavel. "Remove the defendant." The guards took Derek's arms. He struggled, his face contorted with rage. Caroline watched. She felt the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on her, waiting for her reaction, expecting tears or triumph or vindication. She felt none of those things. She felt empty, in a good way, like a wound that had finally been cleaned. Derek was still shouting as they dragged him through the side door. His voice faded, the door closed. Silence fell. Harrison Cole turned to Caroline. "It's over." "Is it?" "The criminal case, yes. The civil case will take longer. But his assets are frozen. His business partners have fled. His reputation is destroyed." Harrison's smile was thin but genuine. "He will spend the next decade in prison. When he gets out, he will have nothing." Carolyn nodded. She stood. Her legs were shaking slightly, but she steadied them. "Thank you," she said, "for believing me, for fighting for me. Thank yourself. You're the one who found the courage to leave." She walked out of the courtroom, through the lobby, past the reporters who shouted questions she didn't answer. On the courthouse steps, the winter sun was bright. Cold air filled her lungs. She breathed deeply. Her father was waiting by the car. He didn't speak, just opened his arms. Caroline stepped into the embrace, let herself be held, like a child, like the daughter she had always been. "It's over, sweetheart," William said. "You're safe now." "I know." She pulled back, looked at her father's face. "But it was never really about being safe. It was about being free." William nodded slowly. "And are you? Free?" Carolyn thought about the question, about the 3 years she had lost, about the healing that still needed to happen, about the daughter waiting for her at home. "I'm getting there," she said. "Day by day, I'm getting there." They drove home together, through streets decorated for the holidays, past houses with warm lights in the windows. A new chapter was beginning. The old one was finally closed. Carolyn watched the world go by and let herself feel hope. The ballroom of the Ashford Grand Hotel sparkled like a constellation brought to earth. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across white linen tablecloths. 300 guests an evening were mingled between arrangements of white roses and pale blue hydrangeas. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The clink of champagne glasses punctuated conversations about philanthropy and progress. Carolyn stood backstage, adjusting the simple pearl necklace her mother had given her that morning. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the crowd, donors and advocates, politicians and survivors, all gathered for the launch of the Aurora Foundation. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from the magnitude of the moment. 1 year ago tonight, she had been lying in a hospital bed, Aurora in an incubator, Derek in a jail cell, her entire life in ruins. Now she was about to step onto a stage and announce the creation of something that could help thousands of women escape situations like hers. The journey between those 2 points had been brutal and beautiful and everything in between. Nervous, Maggie appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Terrified," Caroline admitted. "Good, that means you care." Maggie handed her one of the glasses. "You've got this. You've survived worse than a speech." Carolyn laughed. It came out slightly strangled. "When you put it that way." "I always put it that way. That's why you keep me around." They clinked glasses, drank. The water was cold and steadying. Through the curtain gap, Carolyn could see her parents at the head table. William in his best suit, looking equal parts proud and protective. Eleanor in the blue gown she had worn to her own foundation's 20th anniversary, dabbing at her eyes already. At the next table sat Cynthia Reed with her son Daniel, now 14 months old and determined to grab every shiny object within reach. Victoria Lane sat beside her, elegant in emerald green, reviewing the donor list on her tablet. Brittany Marsh had flown in from California, her testimony at Derek's trial having finally freed her from years of silent shame. 5 women, 5 survivors. 5 warriors who had found each other in the wreckage of one man's destruction. And in the green room behind her, Aurora was happily destroying a board book, while Eleanor's sister, Patricia, tried to keep her entertained. Aurora, the reason for all of this. The light that had guided Caroline through the darkest nights. It's time, the event coordinator said, touching Caroline's elbow. Whenever you're ready. Caroline took a deep breath, set down her glass, smoothed the front of her champagne-colored gown. I'm ready. The lights dimmed. The string quartet fell silent. A hush settled over the ballroom. Caroline walked onto the stage. The applause began before she reached the podium, a wave of sound that washed over her like warm water. She stood in the spotlight and let it flow through her. These people believed in what she was building. They had written checks and made phone calls and cleared their calendars for a Tuesday night gala. They were here because they thought she could make a difference. She hoped they were right. The applause faded. 300 faces turned toward her, waiting. Carolyn gripped the podium, found her mother's eyes in the crowd, drew strength from that familiar gaze. Then she began to speak. Thank you all for being here tonight. Your presence means more than I can express. Her voice was steady, clear, the voice of someone who had found her footing after years of stumbling in the dark. 1 year ago, I was a victim. I was trapped in a marriage built on lies. I was isolated from my friends, manipulated by the person I trusted most, and abused in ways both visible and invisible. She paused, let the words settle. For 3 years, I believed I was the problem, that if I just tried harder, loved better, was more patient, more understanding, more perfect, then maybe the man I married would become the man I thought he was. A few heads nodded in the audience, women who understood, women who had been there. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. Some people don't want to be fixed. Some people don't want to be loved. Some people only know how to take and destroy and move on to the next victim. Her voice hardened slightly. My ex-husband is serving 15 years in federal prison, not because he was caught once, but because he was caught 47 times on surveillance footage. Because 5 women came forward with almost identical stories. Because the pattern of abuse was so clear, so systematic, so deliberate, that even the best defense attorneys couldn't explain it away. She looked at Cynthia, at Victoria, at Brittany. I was lucky. I had resources most people don't have. A father who could afford private investigators. A best friend who happened to be a lawyer. Access to the kind of legal representation that costs more than most people make in a year. She shook her head slowly. Most survivors don't have that. Most survivors are choosing between safety and shelter, between leaving and eating, between their own well-being and their children's stability. Her hand moved to her heart. That's why the Aurora Foundation exists. She pressed a button on the podium. Behind her, a screen lit up with the foundation's logo, a sunrise over water, light breaking through darkness. Our mission is simple. No one should have to stay in an abusive relationship because they can't afford to leave. No one should have to face a predator alone. No one should have to choose between their safety and their survival. She outlined the foundation's programs, legal aid partnerships with law firms across the state, emergency housing funded by corporate donations, counseling services provided by trauma specialists, job training and placement assistance, childcare support for mothers in transition. The audience listened intently. Some took notes, some wiped their eyes. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that the Aurora Foundation will open its first permanent shelter next month. Applause erupted. Carolyn waited for it to subside. The Sunrise Center will provide 50 beds for survivors and their children. Full legal services on site, licensed childcare, job counseling, and something else that might seem small but matters more than you know. She paused. Private rooms, with locks that work, and keys that belong only to the person inside. A murmur went through the crowd. People who had never thought about what it meant to sleep without knowing if you were safe. People who were learning. When you've spent years never knowing when the door might open. When you've slept with one eye open because the person beside you could turn on you at any moment. A room with a lock, a key of your own. That's not a small thing. That's everything. Carolyn thought about the nights she had lain awake in her marriage bed, listening to Derek's breathing, wondering what mood he would wake up in, planning escape routes she never took. The Sunrise Center is funded by two sources. First, the $12 million restitution payment from my ex-husband's criminal conviction. A ripple of surprised approval moved through the audience. Derek Mercer spent years taking from others. Now his money will be used to help the people he hurt, and people like them. She smiled slightly. There was satisfaction in that. Not revenge, but justice. The second source is Ashford Industries, which has committed to matching every dollar of that restitution with corporate donations. More applause. William nodded from his table, acknowledging the recognition without seeking attention. But the Sunrise Center is just the beginning. Carolyn clicked to the next slide, a map of the state dotted with planned locations. Our goal is 10 shelters in 5 years, 10,000 survivors served, policies changed at the state and federal level, training programs for law enforcement and healthcare workers, research funding for prevention strategies. She looked out at the crowd. Domestic abuse thrives in silence, in shame, in the isolation that abusers carefully construct around their victims. The Aurora Foundation brings light, light to expose the abusers, light to guide the survivors, light to show the way forward. She straightened her spine. My daughter is named Aurora. It means dawn, the light after the long night. Her voice softened. For 3 years, I lived in darkness. I thought the night would never end. I thought I would never feel safe again. I thought the woman I used to be was gone forever. She shook her head. I was wrong. The dawn came. It came slowly, painfully, with more setbacks than I could count. But it came. She looked at Cynthia, who was crying openly now. And I'm not special. I'm not stronger than other survivors. I'm not braver or smarter or more resilient. I just had help. I had people who believed me when I couldn't believe myself, who fought for me when I didn't know how to fight. Her voice rose. Every survivor deserves that help. Every victim deserves to become a survivor. And every survivor deserves to become something more. She paused one final time. Something more. That's what this foundation offers. Not just escape, not just safety, but transformation. The chance to rebuild, to rediscover, to become the person you were always meant to be. Carolyn stepped back from the podium. Thank you for being part of that light. Thank you for believing that change is possible. And thank you for helping us prove that the darkness doesn't win. She bowed her head slightly. Not tonight, not ever. The applause was thunderous. The audience rose to their feet, 300 people standing in honor of a journey from victim to survivor to warrior. Carolyn stood in the spotlight and let it wash over her. She didn't cry. She had cried enough in the past year. Tonight was for something else. Tonight was for hope. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of handshakes and photographs. Donors pressed checks into Harrison Cole's hands. Politicians made promises about legislation. Reporters asked questions that Caroline answered with practiced ease. Through it all, she kept finding her way back to the women who mattered most. Cynthia, who had moved to a new apartment last month, who was dating a pediatrician she had met at Daniel's checkup, who laughed more now than Caroline had ever seen her laugh. You saved my life, Cynthia whispered when they embraced. You know that, right? We saved each other, Caroline corrected. That's how it works. Victoria, who had been named the foundation's executive director, who had transformed her guilt about enabling Derek into a fierce commitment to preventing others from making the same mistakes. The donor database is already twice what we projected, Victoria reported, ever the professional. We might be able to open the second shelter ahead of schedule. Of course we will, Caroline said. You're running it. Victoria's smile was small but genuine. She was still learning to accept compliments, still unlearning the habits Derek had instilled in her. They all were. Brittany had brought her new boyfriend, a firefighter from Sacramento who looked at her like she hung the moon. He knows everything, Brittany said quietly, about Derek, about all of it, and he stayed. The good ones do, Caroline said. That's how you know they're good. Maggie circulated through the crowd like a social butterfly with a law degree, charming donations out of people who hadn't planned to give. Her wife Rachel followed behind, rolling her eyes affectionately at Maggie's networking prowess. She's going to raise more money than the entire event committee, Rachel said to Caroline. She can't help herself. That's why I love her. Get in line. The evening wound toward its end. The string quartet played their final set. The catering staff began discreetly clearing tables. Carolyn slipped through a side door onto the terrace. The April night was cool, but not cold. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. She leaned against the railing and breathed. Just breathed. The door opened behind her. Footsteps approached. Beautiful speech. William Ashford joined her at the railing. He was still in his tuxedo, but he had loosened his bow tie. The casual adjustment made him look younger, less like a billionaire, more like her father. I meant every word, Caroline said. I know you did. That's what made it beautiful. They stood together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, survivors of different battles, united by blood and love, and the fierce protectiveness that ran through the Ashford line like iron through bedrock. Your mother cried through the whole thing, William said eventually. She's going to need a new handkerchief. She always cries at my speeches. She cried at your kindergarten graduation, and your ballet recital when you forgot the steps, and that time you gave a toast at your cousin's wedding after 3 glasses of champagne. Carolyn laughed. That was a disaster. That was entertaining. Different thing entirely. More silence. More stars. You know, William said slowly, when you were born, I made a promise to myself that I would protect you from everything, every hurt, every disappointment, every person who might cause you pain. He paused. I failed at that promise. Dad, let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. I failed because protecting you wasn't my job. My job was to raise someone strong enough to protect herself, and I wasn't sure I had done that either. He turned to face her. Tonight I know I did. Caroline's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back all evening. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have. William's voice was certain. It would have taken longer. It would have been harder. But you would have found a way. That's who you are, sweetheart. That's who you've always been. He pulled her into an embrace, held her the way he had when she was small, when the world was simple and fathers could fix everything with a bandage and a kiss. The world wasn't simple anymore, but some things remained constant. I'm proud of you, William whispered, more than I could ever say. I know, Dad, I know. They held each other in the starlight, two people who had weathered a storm together and emerged on the other side. The door opened again. Eleanor appeared, dabbing at her eyes with a fresh handkerchief. There you are. Patricia is asking when she can put Aurora to bed. That child has eaten 3 cookies and is currently trying to remove Harrison Cole's cufflinks. Caroline laughed. That sounds like my daughter. She's a force of nature. She gets that from her grandmother. Eleanor smiled through her tears. Flattery will get you everywhere. The 3 of them walked back inside together. Caroline retrieved Aurora from Harrison, who looked more frazzled than he had during any courtroom battle. Your daughter has very strong opinions about jewelry, he said. She has strong opinions about everything. Carolyn settled Aurora on her hip. The baby immediately grabbed for her pearl necklace. See what I mean? She's going to run the world someday. That's the plan. The gala wound down. Guests departed with gift bags and promises. The catering staff finished their cleanup. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. Carolyn stood in the empty room, Aurora asleep on her shoulder. She looked at the banner hanging behind the stage. The Sunrise logo, the foundation's name in elegant script. 1 year ago, she had been broken, shattered, unable to imagine a future beyond the next meal, the next doctor's appointment, the next moment of survival. Now she was standing in a ballroom filled with evidence of what she had built, what they had all built together, the Aurora Foundation, a legacy born from pain, a lighthouse for people still lost in the storm. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. There would always be more victims, more predators, more darkness needing light. But it was a start, and starts were everything. Carolyn kissed Aurora's sleeping forehead, breathed in the scent of baby shampoo and cookies and possibility. Come on, little one, she whispered. Let's go home. She walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, into the waiting car. The driver pulled away from the hotel. The city lights streamed past the windows. Aurora slept on, oblivious to the magnitude of what her mother had accomplished. That was okay. Someday, Caroline would tell her about the foundation, about the shelters, about the thousands of women who would find safety because one survivor had refused to let her pain be meaningless. Someday, Aurora would understand that her name wasn't just a name. It was a promise, a mission, a reminder that darkness always ends and dawn always comes. The cottage sat on a small hill overlooking the Connecticut shore. It wasn't grand. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened onto a living room, a garden that needed work, and a porch that needed painting. But the windows faced east. Every morning, Caroline watched the sun rise over the water. Every morning, she remembered why she had chosen this place. The estate where she had lived with Derek had been sold. The proceeds went to the foundation. She hadn't wanted to keep anything he had touched. Not the furniture, not the art, not the memories trapped in those expensive walls. This cottage was different. Every piece of furniture she had chosen herself. Every color on the walls reflected her taste. Every corner held only the memories she wanted to keep. It had taken time to learn what she liked. 3 years of marriage had eroded her sense of self so completely that she had forgotten her favorite color, her preferred style, the simple pleasure of making decisions without fear of criticism. The relearning had been slow, painful, essential. Now, standing in her small kitchen on a spring morning, Caroline knew exactly who she was. She was a mother, a survivor, a philanthropist, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged transformed. She was Caroline Ashford, not Mercer, never Mercer again. Aurora sat in her high chair, methodically destroying a banana. 14 months old and already possessing opinions about everything. The fruit had to be exactly ripe. The pieces had to be exactly sized. Any deviation resulted in dramatic protests. "You're very particular," Caroline told her daughter. "You get that from me." Aurora responded by throwing a banana chunk at the wall. "That, however, you get from your father." The words slipped out before Caroline could stop them. She froze for a moment, tested the feeling. It didn't hurt anymore. Not like it used to. Derek was a fact of Aurora's existence, biological reality, nothing more. He had no contact with them. The restraining order was absolute. His parental rights had been terminated after the criminal conviction. As far as the law was concerned, Aurora had no father. As far as Caroline was concerned, that was exactly right. Some men gave life. Others only knew how to take it. Derek fell firmly in the second category. Aurora would learn the truth someday, when she was old enough to understand. Caroline had already decided to be honest about everything. The abuse, the trial, the reasons her father wasn't in her life. But not yet. Now Aurora needed only warmth and safety and banana pieces that met her exacting standards. The kitchen was bright with morning light. Through the window, Caroline could see the garden. Spring flowers were beginning to bloom, daffodils and tulips in the beds she had planted herself last fall. She had never gardened before. Derek had considered it beneath her. "We have people for that," he would say dismissively, as if getting dirt under her fingernails was somehow shameful. Now Caroline gardened every weekend, hands in the soil, sun on her back, creating life where there had been nothing. It was therapy, it was meditation, it was proof that she could nurture things successfully, that her touch didn't destroy. The garden hose lay coiled near the back door. The landscaper had used it yesterday to water the new seedlings. Caroline had noticed it this morning when she came down for coffee. For a moment, the sight had frozen her. The memories came flooding back. The cold water, the freezing night, the baby kicking in distress, Derek's calm voice explaining why she deserved punishment. "You tracked mud on the Carrera marble. You know how I feel about the floors." Caroline closed her eyes, breathed through it, let the memory pass like a cloud crossing the sun. It still happens sometimes. Triggers she didn't expect. Moments when the past reached up and grabbed her throat. But the moments pass faster now. The grip loosened more easily. The cloud moved on and the sun returned. That was healing. Not the absence of pain, but the shortening of its visits. Aurora banged her spoon on the high chair tray. "Mama, outside." "After breakfast, baby." "Outside now." Caroline smiled despite herself. Aurora's determination was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. She would need that determination. The world was hard on women, Harder on strong women. Hardest on women who refuse to shrink. Caroline didn't want her daughter to shrink. Ever. For anyone. 10 more bites, she negotiated, then outside. Aurora considered this offer with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Then she picked up a banana piece and shoved it in her mouth. One. They made it to 7 bites before Aurora's patience expired entirely. Carolyn cleaned up the remaining mess and lifted her daughter from the high chair. The back door opened onto a small patio. Beyond it, the garden sloped down toward a stretch of grass. Beyond that, the property ended at a low stone wall with views of the distant shoreline. It was nothing like the manicured estate where Caroline had lived with Derek. That property had been designed to impress. Every hedge trimmed to perfection. Every flower bed arranged by professional landscapers. Beauty without soul. This garden was wild in comparison. Flowers planted where Caroline felt they belonged. Vegetables growing in raised beds she had built herself. A small herb garden near the kitchen door that was already threatening to take over the patio. It was imperfect. It was alive. It was hers. Aurora squirmed to be put down. Carolyn set her on the grass and watched her toddle toward the flower beds with single-minded determination. "Don't eat the dirt this time," Carolyn had called after her. Aurora ignored her. "Of course," Carolyn followed, ready to intervene if necessary. The morning sun was warm on her face. The air smelled like salt and growing things. She thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago, flinching at shadows, apologizing for existing, unable to make decisions without wondering what Derek would think. That woman felt like a stranger now, a character from a book Caroline had read long ago. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been built in moments, small victories that accumulated into something larger. The first time she ordered food at a restaurant without asking if it was allowed. The first time she bought clothes in colors Derek had forbidden. The first time she disagreed with someone without immediately apologizing. The first time she looked in the mirror and saw someone worth loving. Each moment had been terrifying. Each moment had been necessary. Each moment had brought her closer to the woman she was always meant to be. Aurora had reached the flower bed and was contemplating a daffodil with suspicious intensity. "Look, don't touch," Caroline said, joining her. Aurora touched. Obviously. "Or do that." The daffodil survived the encounter. Aurora moved on to the next flower, then the next, a tiny explorer mapping an enormous world. Caroline sat on the grass and watched. This was her favorite part of the day, the quiet morning hours before the world intruded, before phone calls and meetings and foundation business demanded her attention. Just her and Aurora, the garden and the sky. Ordinary moments that felt like miracles. A year ago, she hadn't been sure she would survive. The divorce, the trial, the premature birth, each crisis had threatened to drown her. Now she was sitting in her own garden, watching her healthy daughter terrorize the plant life, and wondering what to make for dinner. The ordinary had become extraordinary, because she had almost lost it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She checked the screen. James, her heart did a small, pleasant flip. Still surprising after 6 months. "Good morning, beautiful. Still on for dinner tomorrow. I found a new Italian place. No expectations, just good food and good company." Carolyn smiled, typed back. "Sounds perfect. Pick me up at 7? I'll be there at 6:59. I'm eager like that." "Noted. See you tomorrow." She put the phone away. The smile stayed. James. The kindergarten teacher with kind eyes and infinite patience. The man who had asked permission before their first kiss. Who had sat through an entire dinner while Caroline explained her history and had responded by saying, "Thank you for trusting me with that." They had been dating for 6 months, taking it slow, building trust in increments. He had met Aurora 3 months ago, a carefully orchestrated introduction that Caroline had planned with the precision of a military operation. Aurora had thrown mashed peas at him within 5 minutes. James had laughed. "She's got great aim. That's going to serve her well in life." He was good with her, patient when she was fussy, playful when she was energetic, never pushing for more involvement than Caroline was ready to offer. "She's your daughter," he had said. "Your rules, your pace. I'm just happy to be here." Carolyn wasn't in love. Not yet, but she was open to the possibility. That openness felt like its own kind of victory. After Derek, she had assumed she would never trust another man, would never let anyone close enough to hurt her again. But James was different. He made space instead of taking it. He asked instead of demanding. He listened instead of waiting for his turn to speak. It might not work out. Relationships were complicated, people changed, hearts broke, but it might work out too. And Caroline had learned that hope was stronger than fear. Aurora had moved from the flowers to the garden hose. She grabbed it with both hands, fascinated by the coiled shape. "Water," she demanded. "Mama, water!" Carolyn's breath caught. The memory surged again. Cold spray on pregnant skin. Derek's calm voice. The locked door behind her. She could say no, could put the hose away, could protect her daughter from the object that still triggered her own trauma. But that wasn't healing, that was hiding, and Caroline was done hiding. She stood up, walked to the spigot, turned on the water. "Ready?" she asked Aurora. Aurora shrieked with delight. Caroline picked up the hose and let the water flow. A gentle spray. Nothing like the assault Derek had inflicted. Aurora ran toward it with arms outstretched. The water hit her and she squealed, ran away, ran back, got sprayed again. Laughter, pure, uncomplicated joy. Carolyn felt something shift in her chest. The memory of the garden hose was still there, would probably always be there, but it was being joined by something else now. This moment, this daughter dancing in sunlight and water, new memories layering over old ones. Light layered over darkness. She sprayed Aurora again, then herself. The water was cold but not freezing. Startling but not painful. Just water, just play, just an ordinary spring morning. Aurora found a puddle and stomped in it enthusiastically. Mud splashed everywhere. Her dress was ruined. Her shoes were destroyed. Carolyn didn't care. She kicked off her own shoes, stepped into the puddle beside her daughter, let the mud squelch between her toes. "Mama messy," Aurora announced delightedly. "Very messy," Caroline agreed. They stomped together, splashed together, made glorious, wonderful messes that would take forever to clean up. Caroline thought about Derek's marble floors, his obsession with cleanliness, his fury at the slightest imperfection. She ground her foot deeper into the mud. This was freedom, not the absence of pain, the presence of joy, the permission to be messy and imperfect and alive. Eventually, the water game wound down. Aurora was soaked and shivering slightly. Caroline scooped her up, grabbed a towel from the porch, and wrapped them both in it. "Bath time," she said. "No bath." "Yes, bath. You're covered in mud, little monster." "No bath, no bath, no bath." "Counteroffer. Bath, then cookies." Aurora considered this. 2 cookies. 1 cookie. 2 cookies. "Fine, 2 cookies. You drive a hard bargain." They went inside. Caroline ran a warm bath, placed Aurora in the tub with her fleet of rubber ducks. While her daughter splashed, Caroline looked in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back was not the woman who had stood in this same posture 2 years ago. That woman had been hollow, haunted, a ghost wearing human skin. This woman was solid, present, alive. There were still scars. You couldn't live through what Caroline had lived through without scars. But scars were just evidence of healing, proof that wounds could close. "I'm proud of you," she told her reflection. The words felt strange. Self-praise had been forbidden territory for so long. Derek had punished any hint of confidence, had trained her to diminish herself at every opportunity. Unlearning that training is ongoing work. "I'm proud of you," she said again, louder. Aurora looked up from her ducks. "Proud me?" "Yes, baby, I'm proud of you too." "Mama proud, Aurora proud." "That's right, we're both proud." Aurora returned to her ducks, satisfied with this resolution. Carolyn watched her daughter play, thought about the future. In September, Aurora would start part-time daycare, a gentle introduction to the world beyond their cottage. Carolyn had visited 6 facilities before choosing one, had interviewed every staff member, had run background checks that would make the FBI jealous. She knew she was overprotective. She was working on it. But some caution was earned. Aurora would grow up knowing she was safe, knowing she was loved, knowing that her mother would move mountains to protect her, but she would also grow up knowing how to protect herself. Carolyn was already planning that education. Age-appropriate boundaries. The importance of consent. The difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships. Aurora would never make the mistakes Caroline had made, because she would have the knowledge Caroline had lacked. That was the real legacy, not the foundation, as important as that was. The real legacy was raising a daughter who knew her own worth. Bath time ended. Cookies were delivered as promised. Aurora settled onto the living room rug with her board books, content for the moment. Carolyn made herself a cup of tea, sat on the couch, let the morning unfold at its own pace. Her phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number. She opened the message. I saw your interview on TV last week, the one about the foundation. I'm in a situation like yours, my husband. He's not. I don't know how to. Sorry, I'm not good at this. I just needed to tell someone. Can you help? Carolyn read the message 3 times, felt the weight of it. This was why the foundation existed, not for the galas and the press coverage and the donor recognition. For moments like this, strangers reaching out in desperation, hoping someone would hear. She typed back carefully. I'm glad you reached out. That took courage. You are not alone, I believe you. A pause, then. You believe me? You don't even know what I was going to say. I believe you anyway. Whatever he's doing, however he's hurting you, it's not your fault, and there's help. Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know if I can leave. We have kids. He controls all the money. He told me no one would believe me because I don't have proof. You don't need proof to get help. The Aurora Foundation has resources, legal aid, housing, childcare. We can help you make a plan. What if he finds out? What if he gets worse? That's a real fear, but there are ways to plan safely. People who can help you do this right. You don't have to figure it out alone. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. Caroline waited. Finally, what's the first step? Call this number tomorrow morning. Caroline typed Victoria's direct line. Ask for Victoria Lane. Tell her I sent you. She'll take it from there. Victoria Lane, okay. And one more thing. What? Whatever happens, however this goes, you are not stuck. There is always a way out, even when it feels impossible. Especially when it feels impossible, I promise you. A long silence, then, thank you. I don't know why, but thank you. You don't need to know why. Just call tomorrow, please. I will. Carolyn saved the contact as first step. It was her naming convention for these messages. She had dozens of first steps in her phone now. Women who had reached out, women who were finding their way to the light. Some of them made it to the foundation. Some of them weren't ready yet. Some of them she never heard from again. But everyone mattered. Every single one. Aurora had fallen asleep on the rug, board book clutched to her chest. Caroline covered her with a soft blanket and returned to the window. The garden hose still lay on the grass where they had dropped it. Water glinted on the leaves of the flowers they had accidentally overwatered. A mess, a beautiful, imperfect, living mess. That was the truth about healing, Caroline had learned. It wasn't clean, it wasn't linear, it was messy and inconsistent and full of setbacks. But it was possible, even when it felt impossible. Especially then. She thought about the woman who had messaged her, about Cynthia and Victoria and Brittany, about the thousands of women in situations just like hers, just like she had been. There would always be more. More victims, more predators, more darkness. But there would also be more light, more survivors finding their voices, more communities learning to support them, more people refusing to look away. The balance was shifting slowly, painfully, but shifting. Caroline was part of that shift. Her foundation, her story, her willingness to speak publicly about what so many suffered in silence. She couldn't save everyone. She had learned that the hard way. But she could save some, and those some could save others. And on, rippling outward like light spreading from a single flame. That was enough. It had to be enough. Aurora stirred on the rug, made the small sounds of a toddler waking from an unexpected nap. Mama? I'm here, baby. Mama, stay? Always, I'm always here. Aurora relaxed back into sleep. Caroline watched her breathe. This child, this perfect, impossible, miraculous child. She was the reason Caroline had found the strength to leave. The reason she had fought through the divorce and the trial and the endless reconstruction of her shattered life. For Aurora, for the future Aurora deserved, but also for herself, for the woman she had almost lost, for the self that had nearly been extinguished by 3 years of systematic destruction. Caroline had saved her own life. That was the truth of it. Others had helped, but the decision to survive, to fight, to rebuild, that had been hers, and it would always be hers. The afternoon passed gently. Lunch, playtime, the thousand small tasks of ordinary motherhood. Cynthia called to discuss coordinating a playdate. Daniel and Aurora were becoming fast friends, despite their tendency to steal each other's toys. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Cynthia asked. "Sometimes I can't believe it's only been a year. Other times it feels like a lifetime." Both are true, I think. That's how trauma works. "When did you get so wise?" "Therapy. Lots and lots of therapy." They laughed together, two women who had every reason to hate each other and had become sisters instead. "James still treating you right?" Cynthia asked. "So far, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's the trauma talking. Not every shoe drops." "That's what my therapist says." "Then you should listen to her." "And to me. We're both very smart." Noted. After they hung up, Caroline took Aurora for a walk along the shore. The cottage was close enough to the beach that they could reach it in 10 minutes. Aurora loved the waves, the endless motion, the way the water reached for her feet and then retreated. "Ocean big," Aurora announced. "Very big." "Aurora swim?" "Not yet, when you're bigger." "Aurora big now?" "You're big for 14 months, but the ocean is bigger." Aurora considered this injustice with appropriate outrage. Then she got distracted by a seashell and forgot about swimming entirely. They collected shells until Aurora's pockets were bulging. Then they walked back to the cottage as the sun began to set. Dinner, bath, stories. The bedtime routine that had become as familiar as breathing. Caroline sang Aurora's favorite lullaby, a song about stars and dreams and tomorrow. Her voice wasn't beautiful, but Aurora didn't care. She cared about the presence, the consistency, the assurance that her mother would always be there. Aurora's eyes drifted closed, her breathing slowed. Her small hand released the corner of the blanket she always clutched during stories. Caroline sat beside the crib for a long moment, watching her daughter sleep. 14 months ago, this child had been fighting for breath in an incubator. Born too early because stress had forced her mother's body into crisis. Now she was healthy, thriving, full of opinions and energy and fearless determination. She was going to be extraordinary. Carolyn could see it already. The force of will, the curiosity, the refusal to accept limits. "You're going to change the world," she whispered. "I know it. I can feel it." Aurora slept on, dreaming whatever babies dreamed about. Milk and sunshine and the infinite possibilities of tomorrow. Caroline left the nursery door cracked, made herself a cup of decaf, settled onto the couch with a book she had been trying to finish for 3 weeks. The cottage was quiet. The world outside was dark. The only sounds were the turning pages and the distant whisper of waves. Peace. Real, solid, earned peace. It had taken so long to get here. So much pain, so much work, so many moments when she had wanted to give up. But she hadn't given up. She had kept going, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one breath at a time. And now she was here, in this cottage, with this life, with this future stretching out before her like an unwritten book. The book in her hands was a novel about a woman starting over after a divorce. Caroline had picked it up at the Foundation Gala, donated by a publishing house supporter. The story was good, well-written, emotionally honest. But halfway through, Caroline set it aside. She didn't need to read about starting over. She was living it. Her phone sat on the coffee table. She picked it up, scrolled through the photos she had taken today. Aurora covered in mud. Aurora spraying the garden hose. Aurora sleeping with her board book. Aurora on the beach holding a shell like it was the most precious thing in the world. These photos were her real story, the evidence of Guye rebuilding itself on the ruins of pain. She thought about the garden hose, about the way it had transformed in a single morning. 2 years ago, that object had been a weapon, a tool of humiliation and control. Today, it had been a toy, a source of laughter and delight. The hose hadn't changed. Caroline had. That was the secret, she realized. The one she wished she could give to every woman trapped in situations like she had been. You can't change what happened. You can't erase the trauma. You can't undo the damage. But you can change what it means. You can create new associations. You can reclaim the things that were used against you. The garden hose would always remind her of that terrible night, but now it would also remind her of Aurora's joy, of their morning together, of the moment she had chosen to turn pain into play. Both memories existed. Both were true, but she got to choose which one had power. That was healing, not forgetting, choosing. Caroline looked out the window at the dark sky. Stars were appearing one by one. The same stars that had watched her stand in freezing water 2 years ago. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had walked through fire and emerged not unburned, but transformed. The scars remained. They would always remain. But scars were just stories written on skin. And her story wasn't over. It was barely beginning. Tomorrow she would go to the foundation, review the plans for the second shelter, meet with the legal team about new legislation they were supporting, continue the work that gave her life meaning. Tomorrow she would have dinner with James, would let herself feel hopeful about the possibility of love, would take another small step toward trusting again. Tomorrow Aurora would wake up demanding breakfast in attention and adventure, would fill the cottage with chaos and laughter and the beautiful mess of childhood. Tomorrow another woman might find the courage to reach out, to send a message, to take her own first step toward freedom. And Carolyn would be there, would answer, would say the words she had needed to hear when she was in that woman's position. You are not alone, you are believed. There is help. There is always help. The stars continued to appear. The night deepened. The cottage settled into its evening quiet. Carolyn finished her tea, washed the cup, checked on Aurora one more time. Her daughter was sprawled across the crib like she was trying to take up maximum space. Arms and legs everywhere, blanket kicked to one corner. Carolyn smiled, adjusted the blanket, smoothed Aurora's wild hair. Good night, little one, she whispered. Dream big, dream fierce, dream of all the things you're going to become. She went to her own bedroom, changed into pajamas, climbed into a bed that was hers alone. For a long time, sleeping alone had been terrifying. The silence had felt oppressive. The space had felt empty. Now it felt like freedom. The freedom to stretch out, to breathe deeply, to exist without fear of what the person beside her might do. She had earned this peace, every moment of it. Carolyn closed her eyes, let sleep begin to pull her under. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. Next week would bring its crises. Next year would bring changes she couldn't predict. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Her daughter was safe. Her foundation was thriving. Her future was bright with possibility. And she was free. The thought carried her into dreams. Good dreams. Dreams of sunshine and gardens and a little girl splashing in water that was only ever warm. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead. The ocean whispered against the shore. The garden hose lay coiled in the darkness, waiting for morning, waiting to be a toy again, waiting to make memories that would layer over old wounds, waiting for dawn. Because dawn always came, no matter how long the night, no matter how dark the hours, dawn always came. And Caroline would be there to meet it. And that is the story of how one woman turned her darkest nightmare into a beacon of hope for thousands. Carolyn's journey reminds us of something important. No matter how trapped you feel, no matter how powerful your abuser seems, no matter how alone you think you are, there is always a way out. There is always someone willing to help. And there is always a dawn waiting on the other side of the longest night. If this story touched your heart, I would be so grateful if you could take just a moment to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who might be going through their own dark chapter, please share the story with them. You never know whose life you might change. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of Caroline's journey moved you the most. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from you. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and tap that notification bell. We share stories like this every week. Stories of strength, stories of survival, stories that remind us what we're capable of when we refuse to give up. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It means the world. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over. The best chapters are still being written. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.